YouTube. Well, regarding the open borders, right? The federal government has left America defenseless against Ebola. They have also left America defenseless against uncurable tuberculosis or TB. It is antibiotic resistant. So we are having illegal immigrants walking in over the border in the thousands of every day. And pretty much anyone can walk across the border, and anything can drive across the border. As far as I know, there are cut holes with welding torches some 40 feet wide on the American border. Brand new fences that has been spent $100 million to put up, and they've just been cut down overnight. And we have to bear in mind what Mr. Obama has said regarding his fear about that New York City will be nuked. Well, I believe that will be an inside job if it happens. Nevertheless, if it's something they're going to produce, that they are being they have apprehended and prevented a nuclear strike. So while the skies are darkening over the United States of America, Atlanta CBS 46 News is reporting that within days an Ebola patient will soon be transferred to Emory Hospital in Atlanta. No details were provided except to say that the patient is an American and a health care worker who has assisting in the treatment of Ebola virus when they have contracted it. We as Americans may have the worst regular health care in the Western world. The United States has only the 51 longest lifespan behind Cuba, which is at 50s, due to a scourge of managed care and now Obamacare. However, the United States still has the best emergency critical care in the world. Our life-sustaining treatment following accidents or acute illness are beyond compare. Further, our expertise in treatment or treating and containment of potential pandemic viruses and diseases is also the best in the world. Yeah, of course it is. Containment. We got 800 FEMA camps in America, so they got plenty of room for containment. Therefore, when an American healthcare worker contracted Ebola in the treatment of a virus, this should be front page news of every radio station, TV station and newspapers in the country. This is a pro-bio canary in the mine. The CBS 46 minor press release should speak volumes about the gravity of the situation regarding the actual spread of Ebola. If the best critical care system in the world cannot prevent one of its own from contracting Ebola, there is an obvious lack of knowledge on display with regarding the transmission of a deadly virus which kills 90% of its victims within days, as the patient's organs literally dissolve, as the persons bleed out of every orifice before succumbing. I'm certainly not a doctor, but I talk to medical experts, and the gravity of this previous statement within a statement cannot be overstated. When, not if, Ebola gains a firm foothold in the United States, where the people are going to go for treatment, Ebola patients will be inundating their local healthcare facilities and will be treated by medical personnel who will have no idea how to contain this deadly virus. In Africa, containment procedures are not protecting healthcare workers. Soon, the same will be true in the United States. It is an understatement to proclaim that the United States is utterly defenseless in the fight against Ebola. Further, our nation's officials' lack of action, that I will characterize abject stupidity and ignorance, is going to prove responsible for hastening this pandemic within our country as patient zero. Patrick Sawyer was responsible for exposing, according to the CDC's, 30,000 people to the virus. My calculation based on the connecting flights associated with patient zero tells us that 10 times that number were exposed within 6 hours. of this man boarding and deplaning. Containment was lost at this point, and our knowledge about transmission is woefully misunderstood, and the CDC cannot even keep their own story straight. Emory's isolation unit is one of the only 4 such units in the country. According to the hospital, which has also said its staff are highly trained in the procedures necessary to care for the patient. I say again that Emory Hospital is only one of 4 hospitals in the country capable of treating Ebola. The Centers of Disease Control, CDC, describes the transmission of Ebola in the following manner. When an Ebola infection does occur in humans, there are several ways in which the virus can be transmitted to others. These include direct contact with the blood or secretion of an infected person, exposure to objects such as needles that has been contaminated with infected secretions. Along the same lines, the World Health Organization WHO states that Ebola is introduced into the human population through close contact with the blood, secretions, organs, or other bodily fluids of infected animals. In Africa, infection has been documented through the handling of infected chimpanzees, gorillas, fruit bats, monkeys, forest antelope, and porcupines found ill or dead in the rainforest. Ebola then spreads to the community through human-to-human transmission, with infection resulting from direct contact through broken skin or mucous membranes, which with the blood, secretions, organs, or other bodily fluids of infected people, and indirect contact with environment contaminated with such fluids. Burial ceremonies in which mourners have direct contact with the body of deceased can also play a role in the transmission of Ebola. When one considers the last statement of WHO, it's quite clear that it's much easier to spread Ebola through casual contact than the public is being told about. If Ebola can be contracted at a funeral from a dead body, it can spread on a doorknob. In the past 24 hours there has been a movement from the Centers of Disease Control, as there now a record stating that Ebola poses little risk to the USA population. However, the CDC has seemingly backtracked these past 24 hours by publishing new guidelines. For airline flight crews, which includes the following of dealing with potential Ebola cases, these guidelines are listed below. Keep the sick person separated from others as much as possible. Provide the sick person with a surgical mask if the sick person can tolerate wearing one, to reduce the number of droplets expelled to the air by talking, sneezing, or coughing. Give tissue to sick person who cannot tolerate a mask. Provide a plastic bag for disposal of used tissues. Wear impermeable disposable gloves for direct contact with blood or other bodily fluids. This tantamount a mission by the federal government, by the CDC, that they know they cannot keep Ebola from spreading to the United States via air travel. This is absolutely a do-over by the CDC, which is slightly backing off its original position that Ebola is extremely difficult to transmit. However, with each American healthcare worker who is treating the virus contracts Ebola and dies, this point is accentuated that there is a lot about transmission of Ebola that is yet to be understood. With fewer than 700 cases of Ebola is what admittedly is the biggest outbreak in the world history, it would be impossible for the CDC to have conducted the necessary epidemiological studies to establish rates and methods in transmission, because the experimental sample size is insufficient to be able to form cohesive conclusions and generalize to expect contraction rates by the public. We are indeed looking at research science that is befitting an Neanderthal society. In fact, these recent cases further illustrate that the federal government cannot protect you because they have no idea what they're dealing with. After speaking to a number of doctors and nurses, it's apparent that America needs to dust off old familiar term, the dirty doorknob syndrome. The past week, I have put my research skill to work and scourged the CDC website for explanation for highly contagious and deadly viruses from the traditional transmission of these conditions as understood by the CDC. Here's a small sample of what I have learned. I can read the rest. Again, from the CDC, an infected person may have spread the virus, can cause hand, foot and mouth disease through close personal contact, the air, through coughing and sneezing, contact with feces, contaminated objects and surfaces. Please note the reference to contact with contaminated objects and surfaces. If there were even the slightest doubt that Ebola has broken contaminant in the United States was at risk, air travel should have been suspended. Public events should be cancelled for 3 weeks. An example, incubation period for Ebola. And schools should be suspended. One of Arizona's most prominent physicians, Dr. Jane Orion, is advising people to avoid crowds. How will Ebola make its presence known in the upcoming weeks and months? Are there other venues besides air travel that America has to worry about with regard of the transmission of the virus? This will be the point of discussion in the next part in this series. And the revelation are even more dramatic than what you're reading here. And you know, this is pretty much what our Lord Jesus Christ is talking about in Matthew 24. He's talking about pestilences and disease. And Ebola is a pestilence. Disease is cancer. And other pestilences, tuberculosis. There's a lot of pestilences running around in this world which is untreatable because in the pharmaceutical industry they're not looking for a cure, they're looking for patients. And our virus or vira is mutating and becoming resistant to antibiotics. Instead of letting the body deal with the sickness itself, which it is most capable of doing. But when we're speaking about Ebola and AIDS, it is from some people knowledge, but for most people not knowledge, that Ebola and HIV AIDS is a man-made disease in order to eradicate and depopulate the planet. And that is something you can go Google yourself and you will find out that there is tons of material of that it is a man-made disease. So while we're looking at the dark sky, it is definitely going to look very, very dark here in America within foreseeable future, especially when we have an open border. And I again refer to my video, Time to Say Enough is Enough, what needs to be done at the border. In order to protect America from a pandemic, we need to shut that border with any means necessary. It sounds harsh, but think about it. We shouldn't let anyone die, but it would be better let 10 people die than 300 million people. Even though that it is sad, death is sad, but we need to protect our borders. We need to protect America from any intrusion, Ebola, nuclear weapons, terror attacks, drugs, and MS-13, and whatever they're calling themselves. We need to protect our borders. We need to shut it down. And we need to not listen to DC anymore. We need to take the matters in our own hands and make sure that America is protected. Because Washington DC is not going to protect you. They're going to kill you. And that's their plan. I guarantee you that. That's their plan, to kill you. Mark my words. They want to kill you. They are Luciferians, they're communists, and they're working the Soviet Union principle right now. And they are gonna kill you. That's their plan. Reduce you down to maybe 10,000 Americans left, so you're manageable. stand up and say enough is enough. God bless you.